Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Messages. This is Reverend Sydney Finn, as always. And today we are talking all about health anxiety. What actually prompted me to do this episode was I saw another TikTok creator who posted a video and she was saying, people really don't talk about health anxiety, but it's something that I've been struggling with for a really long time and I have a hard time getting a grip on. And I was like, oh my God, I have been dealing with health anxiety for the vast majority of my life, and really over the past 4 years in particular, it has been crippling. Truly, one of the worst symptoms has been the health anxiety in relation to my trauma, right? So I'm going to explain the mechanics of it, what's really going on. But if you or someone that you know, or if you know this is one of the symptoms that you have a friend that deals with, please send this episode out. Send this episode out. I feel like at this point, I pretty much have a PhD in health anxiety from how intimately I've had a relationship with it and how many different things I've had to try and experiment with and all of that good stuff. So I want to give you as much as I can in this episode. And before we get started, if you would like to stay up to date with the different classes and the free workshops that I have that come out and all of that good stuff, and if you want to get a reading every single Sunday, like a message to carry with you throughout the week, make sure you sign up for my newsletter. You can go to onyxhealing.com/newsletter, or it's on the front page of my website. It's also going to be in the description box or the show notes, wherever you're listening to this. But I highly recommend signing up for that. I love my newsletter. And if you want to work with me, you can stay up to date on how to do that and make that happen. Now, let's dive into the meat and potatoes. I'm not going to bury the lead on this. Let's just talk about why health anxiety even exists. So, from an energetic perspective, there are a couple things going on. So, one, just acknowledge that being in human form is a task in and of itself. So I consider being in human form when you embody, that's actually a painful experience. Having to take care of your body and tend to your body and be in tune with your body. Learning how to do things like regulate your nervous system, breathe properly. All of that stuff is a lot of work. Your body does require maintenance. Of course, we want to be good to ourselves. So that's one piece, is like this divine responsibility that you have to care for yourself. Or I like to think about it as a divine responsibility because I have an obsession with optimization, partly because of the health anxiety. Okay, I want to optimize my human form to the best of my ability. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. So that's my perspective on an energetic element of it. Then the other piece of the energetics is when you're experiencing fear and anxiety, essentially it's just a notification that you're not in connection with divine source. You're not connected to God. So anytime you're afraid, you're disconnected. Anytime you're in anxiety, you're disconnected. You've kind of slipped out of your body and bought into human thought forms, right? So if we think about your divinity, the God element of self, that spirit part of you, it's never going to scare you. It's never going to be telling you things that make you feel like shit. That's just not how this works. Anything that steers you in that direction or makes you afraid of your own body, that is going to be either a human construct, a human belief system. It's also going to be an indication that you might be shutting out well-being. If you allow well-being to flow through you, you're not going to be terrified. You're going to feel really good. So anxiety notifies you of this. Fear notifies you of this disconnect. And that's an important thing to keep in mind so that anytime you do have these feelings that surface and come up, you can hold that perspective as well. For a very long time, I could not focus on the energetics of my health anxiety. So let me explain to you what I was experiencing and more of the, I would describe it as the practical things that were coming up when it came to my health anxiety. So we all know, if you've been around here, if you know anything about my background, I had a childhood from hell and lots and lots and lots of overt trauma, overt abuse, okay? So anytime you have trauma when you're growing up, and this is way more common. It doesn't need to be as severe as what I experienced, right? Or what some other people experience. It can be much more mild. But the bottom line is that if you don't retrain your nervous system, it's going to mimic what you grew up in. That's the general rule of thumb. So I grew up in a very high stress household with a lot of addicts, a lot of partying, a lot of instability, a lot of movement. Part of the time I didn't even know where I was going to be sleeping or where I was going to be living. And I grew up like that. And so how it evolved into adulthood was me craving stress. I just wanted to recreate that in my environment and put such an extreme workload on myself to the point where I could maintain that baseline level of stress that was really comfortable for me. So I was constantly in fight or flight. So the high stress was how I was operating for a really, really long time. And one day, based on some moves that I was making and when I first started Onyx Healing, is really when that changed. Because my environment was different. I quit my job. I didn't really have anyone that I was answering to. I didn't have any external stressors at all. I was in a really cushy, comfortable position, and all of a sudden, the external stress pretty much disappeared. What happens when all of that stress disappears is my nervous system was still operating in fight or flight, but the external circumstances didn't require that. And so the fight or flight response doesn't actually sync up with the environment. This is where shit goes really, really sideways. Because when there's that disconnect, you feel crazy. You feel crazy because your feeling, your sensation doesn't match anything that's going on around you. There's nothing wrong, but you feel like you're gonna die. There's no immediate threat, but you're freaking out and panicking. There's nothing happening, but your body is still feeling it. When your body is feeling it and the sensation is there and the nervous system is driving it, then your brain will start to make things up in order to make sense of the sensation. So for me, how this was showing up was health anxiety. The only thing that my brain could make up in order to make sense of the sensation that I was feeling and experiencing was, you're probably going to die. You probably have something physically wrong with you. You probably have cancer. No, it's not just a headache. You actually have a brain tumor, right? Anything that was just relatively common was inflated into the worst case scenario. My brain did that constantly. And particularly, it wasn't always, but the main focus of my health anxiety was my sex organs. So this ended up becoming so bad to the point where I would be experiencing the uncomfortable sensation, right? I'm feeling the panic, or I'm feeling the nervous system be really ramped up. My brain, in a split second, wants to make sense of the sensation, so it would say something like, well, maybe you have breast cancer. And my grandmother died of breast cancer. So what I would do is it turned into an OCD cycle where I would obsess about breast cancer. I would Google symptoms, which is the last thing that you should do. I would look into everything. I would try to gorge myself with information to make sure that I'm okay. Even though I'm terrified of going to the doctor, that's the last place that I want to be in order to avoid bad news. It felt safer in my brain to self-diagnose if anything did come up. So I'd go into this information rabbit hole, this obsession. And then compulsively, I would give myself breast exams. but not like a monthly, oh, check your breasts, this is a normal thing to do. No, I'm talking compulsively, 8 hours a day. I know there's something wrong with me. I know there's something in there. I know there's something that I'm not picking up on. I need to find something wrong. And it would be a compulsion. I used to have people have to tell me to stop giving myself a breast exam because I couldn't stop touching it. I could not stop myself. Like I needed to glue my hands to my pockets. That's how strong the compulsion was. The consequence of these excessive breast exams was me bruising myself. So I would bruise myself, experience pain, and then that would travel back up to my brain, and it would then legitimize my concerns. It would say, see, now you're having pain, now you're having tenderness, something's wrong, you need to check again and again and again and again and again and again and again. It would not stop. Now, there were also other OCD loops that I would get sucked into, but the breast exams in particular were the number one problem. That went on very persistently for about a year, that I couldn't get a handle on that, and I was really struggling with that. Granted, there were many other things. It could be any little thing would send me into a tailspin when it came to health anxiety, but that one was like at the top of the list, the compulsive behavior that I could not stop and that I kept believing every time I would go into it. So before this became a significant problem, before it was dragging on for months and months, I actually started another round of therapy with a new therapist that I found. It was the best one that I could find, the most experienced practitioner that I could get my hands on. So right away, we started working on my nervous system. I'm sure you've heard me talk about the nervous system plenty of times on this podcast. I jokingly call it the root of all evil, because it drives a lot of behavior, it drives a lot of decisions, it drives a lot of these symptoms that get labeled as another disorder, but really we want to continue pointing at the nervous system and looking at that first, in my non-medical opinion. Because if I just went by the label of I have OCD, well, now I'm identifying with a disorder and it's gonna destabilize and disempower me. I'm not into any of that shit. It's a symptom that was being driven by the nervous system, and that's just the outlet that it was taking. So that's the first thing that I want to really make clear. Health anxiety as a symptom is not just health anxiety. It's a symptom of something else that's happening underneath. So generally, I would go to the nervous system first, but there's also other things that can create the sensation and experience of anxiety, like vitamin deficiencies. If you haven't moved your body in a really long time and you are really needing movement, your body is craving movement. If you stay sedentary for too long and you're not moving any energy, that can create some problems. So the point is that the health anxiety is just an expression. It's a red flag for something else that's going on. So that would be the first place that I would recommend looking, is what is the physiological explanation for why this symptom is appearing. Once you pinpoint that, or you can even just try experimenting, like let's say we just assumed it was your nervous system. The nice thing about working with that is you can heal your nervous system with nothing more than breath. It's free. You have breath. You can always return to your breath. So that is something that's extremely healing, and it doesn't require any major intervention. It's not super complicated. You can stabilize your nervous system with breath alone. Another one of my favorite tools is chewing gum. I used that one for a really, really, really long time. So once you pinpoint the physiology, whatever that might be, you've got that down. The second piece that helped me with my health anxiety was just remembering that that is a symptom. So what created some separation between me and my health anxiety was by me being able to observe the health anxiety without necessarily believing it every time. So I could observe the thought and I could observe the story. Okay, my brain is telling me that I have breast cancer. My brain is telling me that, all of these horrible health things are happening and that I'm probably dying because it doesn't know how else to explain the sensation that's going on. It doesn't know how to explain or interpret the nervous system. I know my nervous system is dysregulated because of trauma. I know that my brain doesn't know what else to do with that information, so it's making things up. And when I could remind myself of these things, it didn't necessarily mean that I wasn't afraid. It didn't necessarily mean that I was 100% better by telling myself that, but I could start to drive a wedge between my belief and the story that was going on in my brain. So I did that more and more often, and I could even be terrified inside, but still remind myself of that and be in this liminal in-between space where the fear is present and I'm reminding myself of what's physiologically happening for me in the moment. And practicing that, you get a lot better at observing yourself rather than identifying with it. But you have to practice that. All of these skills took me a very, very long time to really get a handle on. So don't try it for a week and then expect results. You need to be committed and completely devoted to cleaning up your perspective with all of this. Addressing the physiological or the trauma piece, the nervous system piece, whatever you have going on, and really wanting to heal. You have to want it, and you have to want it bad enough to where you will show up for the work every day. You're not just going to throw in the towel at the first sign of anxiety. You're going to consciously put effort into it. And it does require a lot of energy in the beginning, and then it gets easier over time. So that was the second piece that I did, was reminding myself of what was actually happening. The third thing, and this was a recommendation by my therapist, was to get reality checks. Because for me, at least, it was so severe that I was having a lot of distorted thinking, a lot of delusions. I was like in some hellscape in my mind that I could not get out of. And so it was very hard for me to see any type of reality that was non-threatening, essentially. And so a few people that I'm really close to, I would involve in this process in a very light way. So I'm not talking about creating a codependent relationship with them where they are keeping me afloat. But in the event that I thought I was losing touch with what was really happening, or if I was in a situation where I did need some reassurance or something, I could go to them and not worry about them calling me crazy or brushing me off or anything like that. They were able to treat my concern with legitimate compassion. So if you have that available to you, that is one thing that I really, really recommend. And my grandmother, my last remaining biological grandparent, is a nurse, or she was a nurse. She's retired now. But keeping her in the loop of what was going on with me and explaining my health anxiety, and I know the health anxiety isn't rational. I know it's not rational for me to have, a whole bunch of blood work and tests done at the doctor's and then still be convinced that I'm dying for whatever reason. That's not rational, and I know that. But it's very, the brain is relentless. It's relentless. It will keep nagging you. No, you need to believe that something is wrong. The brain really, really wants to have that sense of completion or have that feeling of certainty and safety. And so it does require a lot of diligence in order to change that. So having some people around me to kind of reflect with me in, the most extreme circumstances or when I couldn't get myself there first. Because a lot of this I'm doing by myself. I'm not on the phone 24/7. I'm not consulting people 24/7. It's just on the rare occasion. So there was one time that I'd convinced myself that I had an intestinal blockage, okay, for whatever reason. I don't know if it was a stomach pain, it could have been something as benign as gas, whatever, but I was convinced that I had an intestinal blockage, and I was so distraught over this. I had to drive all the way to my cousin's house. And I asked her before I did this if she was available for me to come over. And I had her palpate my stomach and see if anything felt abnormal. And just that was able to shake me out of it. But I wasn't able to do that on my own that night. So the point of this tool is use it sparingly, but it can be very helpful to have other people involved in your healing if you have that available to you. So that was something that helped me touch back down to earth from time to time. Just don't put the burden of your healing on other people. I want to make that really clear. It's more of, if you can involve people without getting wrapped up into codependency, without relying on them to chronically reassure you, you can use that tool. Just caution with the codependency piece, because I know people can get addicted to the constant reassurance, and that can put a lot of stress on relationships. So you got to be careful with that. The final piece of this that really, really solidified my healing was after all of these practical things that I had been in practice with for a very long time, then I could actually go a little bit deeper into the energetic side of it. If you're too immersed in the delusion, right, and I'm saying that lovingly, like a distorted reality where you believe that you are going to die, that something is so wrong, or you're going to go into a doctor's office and they're going to have to slice you open, right? Because that, at least for me, that's where my health anxiety really took me, was the idea of some other person having control or having the wisdom or having the reins over my body. That shit freaks me out, dude. It still does, no joke, even though I'm creating something very different, right? So once you get beyond the point of, okay, you're stabilized in the practical piece, you've got the practical stuff down, your nervous system is getting better, or maybe you incorporated some vitamins or some practices that you were missing that were really important for your mental health, right? You hammer all of that out. You've got your team of people that you can come to in a 911 situation. You are reminding yourself of what's really happening when it comes to the anxiety. You're doing all of that. Then what solidified this for me was actually going deeper in terms of intimacy with my own body. What I mean by that is the immediate reaction of most people whenever something is either legitimately going wrong or you think something is going wrong and it's an anxiety thought, is we want to move away from it, or we want to disconnect from it. So even though I was giving myself these 8-hour breast exams that were hurting me, it was a way that I was actually disconnecting from my body. I wasn't going into the intimacy with my body. I was actually afraid of my own body. I was experiencing this fear that these things were going to kill me, that my boobs were going to kill me. I'm going to die because of them. That's where I was. And that's a disconnection from my body. So this whole thing actually started by me looking for breast massage. I was looking for breast massage for about 2 years. I was hunting for it. I was asking around. I was trying to either find a practitioner who was certified to do that type of thing or someone to help me with this. And I was shopping for quite a while. And then finally, I ended up finding just like a DIY breast massage course. What's important about the breast massage course isn't that tool. The point is not the tool itself. The point is that it was bringing a tenderness and loving energy to the pain point. So you can't just bandage over when it comes to health anxiety. Like I mentioned before, I could do a whole bunch of tests at a doctor. I have a doctor that lets me pick out my own labs, and I have a lot of control over what happens with my health and what I have tested and how often I'm getting it done. I have a lot of control, and I like it that way. So I could have all of that done, yet my health anxiety would still tell me. It would still tell me, but we don't actually know what's going on. I know we've had all the blood work, but I know you've had a breast exam by a doctor, but I know, but. And so the tests in and of itself don't really provide a sense of completion or a full sense of safety. For some people, that might be true. Maybe the right option for you is to get that opinion from a doctor, is to get a clean bill of health. For me, that wasn't the case. My health anxiety would still kick in no matter what a doctor said. So tests are not a way to create intimacy with your body. It's not a way to develop that connection to your body. It can for some, but I recommend doing something that's more body-based than, numbers on a page. Obviously, this is going to require more creativity on your end. If you struggle with this, you kind of want to look at, okay, what is the thought? How do you actually think you're going to die? What are you convinced is wrong with your body? And then instead of thinking about that part of you as something that's going to kill you, you want to go deeper into the love, deeper into the wellness, deeper into nurturing yourself, deeper into being kind to yourself. You want to go deeper with it, not move away from it out of fear. And for me, at least with the breast massage, it ended up giving me so much confidence, and so in terms of my health, it gave me so much confidence about the well-being of my breast tissue, me knowing what's going on, me knowing how to move a lot of healing energy into my tissues, to the point where I know for a fact I will never experience breast cancer in this lifetime. It'll never happen. The reason why is that I was bridging the practical and the physical with the spiritual and energetic. And it's really important, at least for me, to have both of those things overlap. So from the practical side, my logic, even though there's no data to back this up, my theory is when it comes to breast tissue, oxygen heals. So think about when you're exercising, you're inhaling, your blood is pumping, you're circulating oxygen throughout your entire body. My theory is that with breast massage and draining the lymphatic system and moving all of the energy and circulation in the breast tissue, you're oxygenating that tissue. And from that space, it literally heals anything funky going on. This is my rationale. This is what is satisfying the left brain, if you will. Is, okay, I know this is a very practical way to introduce a healing function of my body, because oxygen heals. It is a healing component. The other piece is the tenderness, the love, and circulating this energy throughout this part of my body makes it so that it's never going to get to the point where it needs my attention. So the way that I like to think about illness from this is a whole other topic, but I really think about illness as attention. It's an alert for attention. So there's something happening that wants your attention. That's really what it drives, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. I think that's a good perspective to hold, just to kind of neutralize the fear. So since I'm already taking the practical side of things and I'm incorporating the energetic, and I'm giving myself a lot of care, a lot of attention, a lot of love, I'm really grounded in that, it has completely dissolved my anxiety about my breasts. Like, breast anxiety is not something that I really experience anymore. Maybe on a particularly rough day, or if I was already having health anxiety flare back up about other things, or I was already in a bad headspace, I could probably wake that part back up. But now with all of the tools, with all of the integration, with everything that I've done, it's really not something that comes to the surface. But it took a long time for me to gather the toolkit, for me to master the toolkit, for me to know what I need moment by moment, and then being able to maintain this level of confidence in my body. So let me just say, for any of you who are struggling with health anxiety, or you know someone who struggles with health anxiety, the biggest gift of health anxiety is that it really gives you the opportunity to go deep with yourself and with your physical body, and to take really good care of yourself and be extra mindful with yourself. And this would also apply to those of you who are experiencing chronic illness or any type of disorders or health problems, anything of the sort. The gift in all of this is going deeper with your physical body. And that's not something that everyone will do. So that is the big thing that I at least have gratitude for in all of this. Not when I'm in the middle of a tailspin am I trying to look at the silver lining, but when I get this bird's eye view, when I'm a little bit further removed from it, I'm able to look at this and say, okay, I really have depth and wisdom and an understanding of my body that a lot of other people aren't going to focus on or aren't going to experience themselves. And so it's something that can really give me a confidence boost when it comes to me knowing that I have control over my physical experience. And that's it. That's a wrap. That's what I've got for you today. I hope this helps. Make sure that you send it to anyone who's experiencing health anxiety. I hope these tips were supportive for anyone who needs them. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review if you feel so inclined. If you would like to donate to the podcast, you're more than welcome to. And all of the links are in the description box or the show notes, wherever you're listening to this. And I will talk to you all next time. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.